Well, it's time to play.
Greetings, ladles and jelly spoons, old and new, to Kohigh Mathy's YouTube channel. Before we look at this month's game, the answers to last month's quiz. Now, the answer to question 1 was £30 a night. The answer to question 2, the odd man out, was of course the cheese sandwich. All the rest were film stars. And caught a lot of you on the wrong foot, that one did. Now, the other answers were a crusty loaf, tuppence back on the bottle, Tom Cruise, a Himalayan goat, and the puzzle picture was of course a bird's eye view of an orangutan's tonsils. Now, as well as being a classic retro video game birthday, did you know that this month also marks the anniversary of the birth of Isambard Kingdom Fortinbras, the father of the doorknob? Until Isambard stumbled upon his ingenious invention, people who found themselves inside a room couldn't get out. They just hung around in surly groups looking baffled and muttering to each other, "How can we get out? There's no doorknob." Well, there's no telling how long the situation would have gone on if young Isambard hadn't come along. He'd always been an inventive turn of mind, having when quite young invented the hand-operated bicycle pump, which there was little demand for as bicycles had yet to be invented. In those days people rode horses and there's little call for a horse pump. In fact, any attempt to pump up a horse is doomed to failure. At least that's what I've always found. Now, where was I before I so rudely interrupted myself? Oh yes, one day he was sat at his study, which adjoined his pink bathroom, when the thought suddenly struck him, why not a doorknob? And for years he worked developing and perfecting his design until finally there it was on paper, the blueprint for the perfect doorknob. Unfortunately his plans came to nothing as he couldn't get out of the room to tell anybody about it. Right, that's enough history, back to video games. This month we are back looking at the PlayStation 2 and a game that arguably only became a classic because of the demo that came with it. This month we are looking at Zone of the Enders. Zone of the Enders, officially abbreviated as Zoe, is a third-person shooter hack-and-slash video game that is based around mecha combat in outer space, and was developed and published by Konami for the Sony PlayStation 2. March 2021 marks the game's 20th anniversary. Set on a space station around Jupiter, the game puts you in the shoes of a young boy named Leo Stenbuck, a colonist and one of the few survivors of a colony attack by the military forces Bahram. You, the player, take control of Leo as he pilots a mecha that this game calls orbital frames that goes by the name Junti, a reference to the Egyptian deity Jehunti, the second king of the Theban in the 16th dynasty, or the 4th king of the 17th dynasty, depending on which Egyptologist you believe. Originally they had planned to name the orbital frames Anubis, after the ancient god of death. Leo takes it upon himself to return the orbital frame to the Space Force and protect civilians along the way.
Target has has ceased all functions. You are correct. You did win.
Who are you?
I am Ada.
The idea behind Zoe's development was to try and create a more serious and realistic focus on the mecha genre, as to that point there had always been a camp sci-fi nature around them. Zone of the Enders spawned 2 follow-ups, The Fist of Mars, a spin-off for the Game Boy Advance, and The Second Runner, a direct sequel. Japanese animation studio Sunrise also produced 2 Zone of the Enders animes. The game was re-released in 2012 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 alongside its sequel Zone of the Enders The Second Runner as part of the HD collection. Zoe was produced by the legendary Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid fame, and because of that, Zone of the Enders was packaged with the first publicly available demo of the highly anticipated Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Zone of the Enders began its development for the PlayStation and PC, however at the time Konami...
Hit the lever!
Sorry, it's personal tick. Developed early prototypes for the Sega Dreamcast at first. It's unclear as to what made them change development back to the PlayStation, but it's safe to say that Hideo Kojima's scope for the game was probably a factor. Konami...
Hit the lever!
Sorry. Wanted the game to have a strong sense of realism, and to try and shake off the common sci-fi trappings that anime-style robots were known for. The development team is said to have been advised by academics who had done in-depth research on anime-style robot anime series. Writer and director Noriyuki Okamura wanted to write a heartfelt, serious story with complex characters. The game's main theme examines the nature of life, as reflected in Leo's struggles during the game. To this effect, the game's story only features one canonical ending, but it could be presented differently depending on how successful the player had been at protecting civilians. Alternate outcomes were possible during side quests, and this was somewhat in contrast to 3D games that were in development in other studios at the time. Designed to tell the story through gameplay sequences rather than during cutscenes, Okamura and the development team added extra levels of detail to the game's world to better inform you, the player, of your objectives. This is said to have displeased character designer Nobuyoshi Nishimura, who found it difficult to design characters that would both fit into the mechs and into the game world. The dev team worked for a whole year on the camera in the game to give you, the player, the sensation that you were controlling a fast robot, but also Nishimura wanted the camera to move as often as possible to emphasise the appeal of mechs during gameplay. The game mechs/orbital frames were originally intended to feature unique transformations, but it was decided that the act of flying and skating was more than enough to make the mecha-based gameplay enjoyable.
I have detected a Type C orbital frame in front of our position. It is different from the ones we have previously experienced. Please be careful.
For anyone wondering, yes, that is the cockpit of the orbital frame, and yes, it was placed there as a joke. Originally set for a February 2001 release, the game was pushed back to March and was released in Japan with Over Zoe 2167 Idol. Set 5 years before the events of the game and produced by Sunrise and praised by the game's designer Okamura, noting their experience in producing robot anime, he also aided in the design of the titular frame Idol, to ensure the continuity between the animation and the video game. Released on March 27th in North America and March 23rd in Europe, the PAL and NTSC original releases were packaged with a preview demo of the then upcoming Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty.
We have a responsibility to the coming generations.
What responsibility?
To keep track of the mistakes we've made as a species.
We need to remember, to spread the word, and that's what keeps me alive. But you died!
When you give in to fear, the darkness comes. Then he's all mine.
It's been a long wait, Solid Snake.
I didn't kill your father. Charades usually are humorous.
Somebody more important. Anyway, they bring me luck.
There's room for only one snake and one big boss.
Looks like you were long overdue for retirement.
It's been a view held by myself and a lot of other video game fans that Zone of the Enders wouldn't have seen such large-scale sales in the West if it wasn't for the inclusion of the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. Indeed, a lot of the reviews at the time made note that the game was okay, but only worth purchasing if only for the Metal Gear Solid demo. As mecha games and films and comics and anime are 10 a penny in Japan, it was a safe bet that it was going to sell well in its home territories, but I do remember only being aware of it myself because of the Metal Gear Solid demo. Hope you're enjoying the video so far. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, then please think about doing so, and if you think anyone else you know might enjoy this content, be sure to share it out with them. Now, back to the video. Zone of the Enders is not your classic hack and slash third-person shooter style game. You, the player, take control of the orbital frame Junti as the child survivor Leo Stenbock. Junti is capable of three-dimensional movement, flying, hovering and quickly traversing across different areas of the in-game environment. Junti's health is managed with items known as Metreon ore that is available in every area, and Junti uses onboard weaponry such as an energy sword, energy projectiles and various sub-weaponry. As the player progresses and attacks rogue orbital frames, you can perform advanced maneuvers such as grabbing and throwing enemies. Junti can lock onto each enemy individually and use booster jets to move quickly and dodge enemy attacks, as well as deploying an energy shield. Your arsenal grows and you obtain extra programs to expand your abilities, by way of taking the representative code from fallen enemies to gain the experience.
I was too careless.
Viola, evacuate now.
What? Are you crazy? It's just a kid.
However, not all of the mission objectives involve the neutralization of rogue orbital frames. Some stages the objective is to minimize damage to nearby buildings and save civilians, encouraging more strategic combat. At the end of each stage/mission, you the player are given a rank based on how many buildings and civilians were destroyed or spared. In turn, the rank you are given throughout the game has an effect on the ending sequence you're presented with. To avoid a linear experience and to encourage replayability of the game, you the player are given the option as to which mission/stage you want to tackle next.
Let us avoid unnecessary battles.
Once you've completed the game, a versus mode is unlocked. You, the player, can challenge a friend to a very ambitious but basic fighting game that sees the two of you controlling an orbital frame of your choosing. In the year 2172, mankind has colonised Earth's, Mars and Jupiter's moons. A military force known as Bahram sends the primary offensive unit to attack Antilla, a Jupiter colony, in an attempt to secure two advanced machines known as orbital frames. One of the few colony survivors, a young boy named Leo Stenbock, witnesses a falling laborious extra-orbital vehicle, LEV, killing his friends. He flees to a hangar where he finds an orbital frame by the name of Junti. Using the suit and its inbuilt intelligence Ada, he fends off the Bahram forces led by Officer Viola, who was sent to claim Junti on the orders of their leader, No Man.
Good morning. Ready for combat operation.
Voicing the game's English cast, we have most notably Roger Jackson as the antagonist No Man. Jackson is best known as Mojo Jojo in the Powerpuff Girls and Anton Sokolov in the Dishonored series.
All we need is the name of the Lord Regent's mistress. It's very simple.
I elect not to tell you.
Actor and composer Remy LaBouffe voices Leo Stenbock, and Bouffe has done little outside of the Zone of the Enders games. Voicing Junti's AI Ada, we have Cynthia Marcucci, who has continued to work in various video games as a voiceover artist.
I advise you to take some medication to stabilize your condition.
And finally, Viola is voiced by Jean Matze, who seems to have left the acting world.
To spaceport. I'll be waiting.
Composing the game's music, we have Maki Karioka, Akihiro Honda, Norihiko Hibino, Toshiyuka Kakuta, and finally Soichi Kabori. The game's soundtrack was released in Japan in 2001 by Konami Music Entertainment. According to the director, the music is calming during the normal situations, with new tracks added in the combat situations to increase the complexity of the music while fighting. The main theme, Kiss Me in Sunlight, was composed and performed by Heart of Air. Whilst the main theme is worth a listen, I was never really taken by the rest of the soundtrack. You can certainly listen to it outside of the game itself, but tracking down a physical copy might set you back a few quid. Once again though, it is easily findable on YouTube. Zone of the Enders received a generally positive response. The game's fighting system was praised for its use of 3D camera work and Junti's fast movements, but combat was said to be too easy due to the poor AI. The story was criticised for having whiny characters, and the English script was criticised for being repetitive and the voice actors being emotionless. It was the runner-up for the GameSpot's annual Most Disappointing Game Award amongst console games in 2001. And it only managed the 81st best-selling game in Japan with a total of 120,658 units sold. It was the 6th best-selling game in North America during March 2001, but as already noted, sales were boosted by the inclusion of the demo for the highly anticipated Metal Gear Solid 2. The game was successful enough in Japan that in June 2001, Konami announced a spin-off game titled Zone of the Enders: The Fist of Mars for the Game Boy Advance that was to be developed by Sunrise Interactive, who were also responsible for the animated television series titled Zoe Dolores I. In May 2002, Konami announced Zone of the Enders: The Second Runner, and it was to be released for the PlayStation 2 in February 2003. Zone of the Enders was ported to the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 alongside the Second Runner in October 2012 as part of the Zone of the Enders HD collection. A sequel to the Second Runner was announced in May 2012 as the Enders Project, but was cancelled a year later due to difficulties with the HD port. Whilst I enjoyed Zone of the Enders, I have to say I do agree a lot with the reviews from the time. The English VO is not good and the combat is quite basic. I was also quite guilty of only being aware of the game because of the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. It's not a bad game by any means. I enjoyed playing it back in the day and I've played it a couple of times since. What I will say is that I'm quite forgiving of some of the game's sins. This was an early PlayStation 2 title. The idea was there, but the execution was left wanting. That said, the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo was certainly an indication that Konami Productions was very much aware of what the PlayStation 2 was capable of. And so, to the end of the show. I'd just like to take a moment to say a huge congratulations to friend of the channel, Mr. B from Mr. B's Ukulele channel, who has been a long-time supporter of this channel. He recently hit 500 subscribers over on his own channel, Mr. B's Ukulele channel. He's come a long way here on YouTube from his humble beginnings as a window dresser at the local horse meat shop, and if you've ever thought of taking up the ukulele, he is well worth a look. He has easy to follow tutorials and play along videos. Well done Mr. B, here's to the next 500 subscribers, hashtag road to 1000. Before we go, the Limerick competition. Yes, it's still a thing. The winning entry was as follows. An amateur gardener from Brood developed a cactus quite lewd. He said when it trembles, it rather resembles Sophie Loren in the nude. And so, this week's two opening lines. Two men in a factory near Cork were eating their soup with a fork. Complete the following 3 lines in the comments down below, and to the winner goes a do-it-yourself taxidermy kit that includes a live gorilla, a loaded gun, and 300 weight of sawdust. That's all for this week. All that remains is for me to let you know that next week we'll be asking the question, Coal, is the outcome black? Cheerio, see you next week.